Eskom has confirmed that it is investigating an alleged act of sabotage to the power lines feeding Lethabo Colliery, which supplies coal to the nearby Lethabo Power Station. South Africa's struggling power supplier went offline for several hours on Wednesday after an electrical pylon collapsed. Nickolaus Bauer is now at the scene near Vereeniging and joins us live. Nickolaus, a very good afternoon to you. What are you finding there on the ground? What we saw earlier on were images that were projected on the screen of where this power was actually cut.
Yes, Tommy, good afternoon to you. We bring you this exclusively on Newzroom Afrika. I'm standing in front of the pylon that actually collapsed on the backup electrical pylon that feeds electricity into not the Lethabo Power Station, but the Lethabo Colliery that supplies coal to arguably the most reliable power station in Eskom's fleet. Lethabo, if I just follow with the bird's eye view through from where I am, adjacent to us about 5 to 6 kilometers away as the crow flies, and this is what caused the power station to go offline this past Wednesday. So just looking behind me here, you're seeing a very 15-meter tall electrical pylon that is the main power source to the Lethabo Colliery. Now, I'm going to ask our cameraman, the Njabula, to just swing to his left-hand side, and you're going to see the backup electrical pylon from which the primary pylon fell and caused the power station to go offline, with the first instances of a problem, the trip in the power supply to Lethabo Colliery being picked up at the nearby substation just near us here. Now, you may be wondering how a huge multi-ton pylon just manages to fall over, and this is what Eskom is currently investigating. How did this multi-ton pylon managed to just fall over on the backup line into Lethabo Colliery? And it's got to do with the fact that the anchor points for the metal straps that keep the pylon in place were what looks like grinded out. It doesn't look as though this was done with a hacksaw. This was definitely done with an angle grinder or some sort of power tool. And it is but one of 4 points that were angle grounded out of the ground, allowing these backup struts here, the cabling that keeps the pylon in place, to fall to the ground. You can see now Eskom technicians have replaced it, but essentially what happened is this main power line then fell over during a storm on Wednesday, hitting the backup power source into Lethabo Power Station, and I'll show you the extensive damage that it caused to the backup power line. Njabula just follows me here now, and I'll be able to show you the second point where the anchor points for this metal cabling that keeps the pylon in place was angle grinded out. If you just have a look down below, over here, also a very professional job, definitely not something that was done with a hacksaw. You can even see how this was done, and it's very, very fresh. It's got a little bit of mud in it, but we'll show you as well that this is much the same for the other two anchor points that were angle grinded out, that led to this pylon falling on top of the backup pylon and preventing coal supply into Lethabo Power Station. I asked Njabula to just follow me a little bit here until we get a better angle on the damage that was caused to the backup pylon. We just follow my line of sight from my hand, and we'll show you exactly where this damage was caused when the primary electrical pylon fell into the backup pylon. Just to remind you, if you've just joined us, we're live in Vereeniging at the site of alleged sabotage that Eskom is currently investigating. These two pylons that we're showing you provide electricity into the Lethabo Colliery, not into the Lethabo Power Station, but into the coal mine, the colliery that provides coal to arguably one of South Africa's best run and most efficient power stations. Now, if Njabula just follows me again, you'll see that the foundations of these pylons completely fell out towards the secondary pylon. And so it was due to the fact that the anchor points for this metal cabling that keeps the pylon in place were angle grounded out. And my initial thoughts, Tommy, are in a society where we're seeing kilometers of railway track and cabling disappearing on a daily basis, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that these pieces of metal that were angle grounded out of the ground were done so to be sold for scrap metal. But that being said, you need to ask yourself the question, why was a half a meter of metal, an anchor point for this cabling that held this pylon in place, taken away, and long lengths of metal cabling itself, as well as these struts over here of the pylon itself that fell over, why were they also not angle grinded out and taken away and sold for scrap metal? We'll hopefully be able to get some answers in a moment or so. We're going to move now to the other 2 points where the anchor points of the pylon were angle grinded out, where we're joined by the 2 technicians at Eskom that have been trying to piece together exactly what happened here. And of course, Mushangu Sivambu and Andre Daniel. We'll also hear from Eskom spokesperson Sikunati Manshansha, as I also just help Njabulo guide him through. It's a lot of rubble and material on the ground here. And this is the other point, the third point that we're going to show you now, where an anchor point for the cabling that held the pylon in place was angle grinded out. As you can see, the cut's still very, very fresh. And Tommy, I need to remind viewers here, this has not been done with a hacksaw. It's a very, very, very clean cut here, and if it's not an angle grinder, it's definitely some sort of power tool that's been used to angle grind this out. Now, let's try and get some answers from
Nickolaus,
the men that have been tasked with trying to solve this.
I wonder, Nickolaus, is there an indication of the
Yes, Tommy?
Is there an indication of the time period as to how long ago this actually happened? Are you now literally walking on a fresh crime scene, or what are the timelines looking like?
Well, let's hear from the Eskom spokespeople and representatives that are gathered here that actually brought us to the scene exclusively. We're joined by Mashangu Shivambu here. He is a manager here in Gauteng. And I mean, we first of all need to start off by asking, how prevalent is this type of thing in the provision of not only power to and from our power stations, but indeed also to collieries, coal mines and other sites that feed into the Eskom grid? How common is this type of thing?
No, we're experiencing vandalism of our infrastructure on a regular basis. I'll say every 2 weeks we do experience this type of things where people come and vandalize Eskom infrastructure, which is supplying power to our communities as well as the businesses.
So Eskom has said that they're investigating sabotage. We'll hear from Sikunati in a moment or so, the Eskom spokesperson, as to how that's going. But speak to us from a technical point of view. I mean, I've explained to our viewers that there's a main pylon that feeds power into Lethabo Colliery, and this is the main pylon falling into the secondary pylon. But from a technical point of view, what exactly happened and when?
Yeah, I cannot really comment about sabotage. Like I said, that like this happen more often of people vandalizing electrical infrastructure. But what happened on Wednesday the 17th at 1436, there was a trip at the substation. On investigation, we found that the cause of the breaker trip at the substation was because the 2 lines that you see here, which is supplying power to Lethabo Power Station coal, one line, which is the backup supply for the other, it collapsed. The people cut the stays or the anchors, which are supposed to keep the power line in position. So after they cutting the stays, then the one line collapsed on top of the other, rendering both lines now not to be able to supply power to Lethabo coal.
Mr. Shivambu, I mean, it's not as though, well, we just don't know from what I understand exactly when these anchor points were taken away, but it is possible that it was done before Wednesday when there was a storm with severe winds that perhaps caused the pylon to fall over.
Yeah, correct. The cut happened prior to Wednesday because the line collapsed on Wednesday the 17th at 1436. that's when they break a trip. And we commissioned our guys to come to the station to investigate. And they worked tirelessly until we were able to restore supply at 2100 hours to make sure that we don't lose the coal supply at the power station, because that will have affected the generation power station not to be able to function without coal.
I understand that you're saying that vandalism is a very common occurrence nowadays, with electrical infrastructure being carted away and ostensibly also sold for scrap metal. But let's look at the facts. I mean, there's parts of the pylon that could arguably be far more valuable to a scrap metal thief than the small half-a-meter lengths that will angle grind it out.
Yeah, very true. There is vandalism that we have observed when we came to site, and all we can say that people vandalized the infrastructure and that nothing much was stolen from the infrastructure. So people just deliberately cut the stay wires, which rendered the structures not to be strong enough, and because of the storms and the rain that we had, the structures collapsed. And you can see from the cut themselves, they're still very fresh. You can see that it's something that happened recently.
Well, we're going to leave Mashangu Shivambu for the moment, and I'm going to ask Njabula if you can just try and turn to your right. I want to show you, Tommy, that there is a municipal electrical pylon just 30 meters from where this incident took place. And you have to ask yourself as well, why did that remain untouched? It's almost as if someone knew that this was going to kick out the coal supply to Lethabo Power Station if this was an action that they undertook. Let's try and finish this interview now with a word from Sikonathi Mantshantsha, the Eskom spokesperson. You've brought us here today, and you can confirm Eskom is investigating sabotage.
Absolutely, Nickolaus. Not only with regards to this, but as Andrew Director did announce yesterday, we have had quite a few serious and suspicious incidents, both outside and inside power stations, and we have stepped up security inside the power stations in particular, and surveillance both overt and covert. And we have indeed these incidents. Eskom has reported this incident and a few others to the police, with a view to investigating indeed whether this is sabotage. I must hasten to add at this point that we cannot say we have firm evidence that this is sabotage. We are investigating that. We have these issues that keep worrying us, where you have multiple units tripping at odd times at power stations, which has caused this kind of suspicion.
I understand you can't rule out another reason as to why this incident took place, but if you look at the facts, a small half a meter long piece of metal has been taken at 4 points, destabilizing one pylon in particular that's right next to a backup pylon, and that does tell a story in itself.
It totally collapsed the supply to the mine for that particular point until the colleagues intervened and restored supply and made a plan about supplying the mine. We have left this now to the law enforcement agencies, and the team is going to work to now stabilize this power point permanently, but that is what we are working with at this point.
You say Eskom's beefing up security. Do you have the budget? Do you have the manpower?
So if you beef up security, you actually prevent bigger losses. So the manpower, we don't have too many issues with that. We don't have too many issues with the budget for security, but obviously that does take money away from operations, from investing in the operations and in the maintenance to invest in security. You can't choose. You just have to beef up security. We have contracted companies to help us on that aspect. But the reality is, South Africa has got 390,000 kilometers of electrical infrastructure. It is not possible to put a policeman or security guard or a drone in each and every one of those. So we do rely largely on the law enforcement agencies. We wish to invite the public to do what they can to assist as well, to prevent these kinds of vandalism, to prevent these kinds of crimes by reporting what they see to the authorities, to the police, and indeed to Eskom.
Sikonathi Mantshantsha, the Eskom spokesperson at the scene of alleged sabotage. The national power provider is investigating. They've also reported it to the SAPS. But Tommy, as we heard with the crime stats being announced by the Police Commissioner Kethle Sithole and Minister Bheki Cele, SAPS already have their hands quite full.
They certainly do have their hands very full, Nickolaus. Thank you very much for, I guess, painting a much clearer picture as to what is going on the ground, how that particular pylon fell, the fact it was cut in 4 different places, looking like something very intentional. But as you rightfully said, investigations are underway to find out exactly what is at the bottom of that.